It's not even going to get one grass mowing, I mean, for all of the fields that they're using. So looking at the cost of what everything is going to cost as far as maintenance programs, if there needs repairs, and what goes into these fees is also capital planning. So if there's an issue down there with the clubhouse or something that needs to get done, we should be able to say, okay, yes, we have that money in revolving from user fees that we can fix that, or we can put it on next year's capital plan when we should have more user fees type of thing. So I think if we don't establish a fee somewhere as a base, and looking at, you know, surrounding areas and just what we should be doing down at the fields, I think $25. I think that's what I had put.
Let me pull it up. I have it right
I think I
here.
have it right here.
Youth organization, looks like they're
20.
20.
Yeah,
20.
20.
Yeah, I think it's 20, and then it non-residents a little bit higher.
Yeah, and yeah. So I think if we don't establish that somewhere, and you guys can tell me, I don't know the last time that user fees went up, if it's just been established at $10 and that's it. And I also think we need to have a better process for adult organizations versus them coming to us and we just say, okay, this is the set fee. Because if I have other organizations, it makes it hard for me to just say yes or no when I have to say, I'm not really sure yet. Let me check and see. So I think we just need to establish the groundwork somewhere with fees and policies in general for the parks, so that when people do reach out, I can easily say to them, yep, this is it, and these are our policies type of thing.
Okay, so to answer the question, go ahead, Susanna.
It sounds like that was basically what they were asking for, is just a real cut and dry. What is the policy? What can we expect? What are we on the hook for as volunteers? And how do I justify this increase in rates of the kids and stuff like that? But I mean, I think that they're willing to pay the extra money. They're just wanting to make sure that their basic field stuff is going to get met. And that's what you're here for, to be the liaison between DPW and Little League.
Yeah, and I think it's important that Little League know who they need to come to for certain things.
Yeah.
For instance, I don't know if they went to Jack on some things. I know that a few emails were sent to him, and he did bounce them back to me. And I've tried to stress with everybody to come to me. That way I actually know what's going on the field, since I'm the one permitting them. So yeah, I would just make it a point that they know to come to me for things, especially, like I say, I had no idea about the fence until they had mentioned it.
So I did tell them during that you were the go-to, and that if they didn't get a reply back, they could reach out and let one of us know, and we'd get on it. But I did make that clear. To answer your question on when that fee was raised, that was the fee that we established, and it's never been raised since then. I think this is it was established the year I believe I came onto the commission, which was either 3 or 4 years ago. So it has not been raised since then. At the end of the day, the fields are, even though I'm not 100% sure I have a great handle on what those numbers are to maintain those fields, they're not inexpensive to maintain, between water in, watering the fields and even just the mowing. I'm not sure what we bring in from them even begins to cover. I don't think it begins to cover those expenses. So I'm good with an increase as long as we can make sure that they're getting more next year than they did this year, even if that means somebody walking the property and making sure that, sorry, Anna just texted me. She wants to speak too. Anna, give me 1 second and I will, just unmute yourself and give me 1 second and I'll call on you. I just want to make sure that they're getting more next year than they did, or they felt they were getting this year.
And I definitely, that's my goal. And it, being my first year, just trying to figure out what has been going on, what needs to be corrected. It's one of those things that everybody wants to come in and hit the ground running, but at the same time, want to make sure you have a firm understanding of what's going on before you hit the ground running. So, you know, I now know who we've contacted in past to help maintain the fields. And I plan to figure out a schedule that I actually know who's on the field, not only who's on the fields when, but that I know when the maintenance on the field is going to be done, whether that's just mowing, whether that's the fertilization plan or anything like that. So I will be able to have that and know, so that if there is long grass, which there shouldn't be because they'd be on a regular schedule, I can easily reach out and say, okay, why did we miss one? Or nope, they're doing it today, guys, or anything like that.
Okay. Anna, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so one thing, just thinking back in history from when my kids were young and in Little League, a lot of the work that we were trying to get it done and through the town used to be done by volunteers. And I think that we are a little bit in a transition period where, you know, we now have a Parks Commission that's more active and overseeing the properties as it should. We have a Parks Director, if that's your title. I'm sorry if that's not the official title. But one thing I think will be a mess is if we don't create a space within this new structure to allow for volunteers. So there should be, as we increase the fees and we make it more costly for families to participate in some of these activities, it should be a way or means for these organizations to offer work in lieu of some payment or as part of the payment. And that could be something that can be regular schedule. For example, you know, Little League, they're the only ones using the baseball field. Well, maybe they're responsible for mowing, and there is an expectation of X number of mowings per season. And because I think there are two folds to that is we have a lot of property that's under the Parks Commission, and I don't think I know of them all, but we don't want to, I don't think the town would be able to afford the maintenance to the level that it needs if we don't accept some volunteer structure into these fees. And the other side is really the cost for the families. So we need to be able to offer a way for a family to volunteer, or for the league to offer as part of their payments some volunteer and some actual work that is documented and, you know, checked on the pond. That's all. And I'm going to mute myself and get off the camera as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So just to kind of touch upon that real quick too, that would definitely be something that Little League can establish. But from a town perspective, as long as they had an established policy and we knew who was on the field when, because it could turn into a liability issue for us if they're doing some type of maintenance and they were to get hurt. We want to make sure that all the user groups, they turn in a certificate of liability, but we want to make sure we know who's on the field when, so it's not coming as a surprise to us. Hey, this happened today and we had no idea that anybody was down at the fields doing work. In all of the communities I've worked in, all of the youth organizations have had some form of community service. In my last community, they organized several cleanup days throughout the year. And they had a whole list of projects, and people could sign up for those projects. And that list was shared with me weekly, if it changed weekly, basically so that we knew who was on the field, so it didn't turn into a liability issue for the town. So I definitely think that volunteers is a great idea, but I think that that's something that would have to be established with Little League versus the rec department. And Karen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that would have to come from Little League.
Well, I mean, I think the Parks Commission can have it as a policy, the guidelines that you just established. I mean, if part of the payment is work in lieu of some payments, we need to know when people are going to be in the field, who will be in the field, and which work's going to get done. So that would be our policy. And it would be for them or any other organization to meet those conditions.
Yes.
No, and you're both, I think you're sort of both on the same page on that. So it's not really a concern. My whole thing when I see an email come through that says that we've done X amount of work is what they did for work, whether it was appropriate work to be done in that area. Marshall Park abuts some conservation area, so it can be a fine line in what can and cannot be done. And if we don't know it was done and the Conservation Commission comes after us, there's nothing we can do. Because, well, we'd be the ones holding the bag because we didn't know that it was being done though. But I do think there's a way to do it. I think we need to come up with a policy in general anyway, as we're working on our policies this year, to say it has to go through, most likely Kayla, through you, since you're in the office, more often than any of us are, because we're technically not in the office. To say you need an approval before you go out on the field and do X, Y, and Z. But yeah, I agree with you that I think that we can certainly come up with something so that there can be some volunteerism down there. Because I do think even when the kids are involved and they take ownership of something that they're doing, they appreciate the space that they're using a little bit more. So no, I agree with that. I definitely agree. Does anybody else have anything on that before we move to making a final decision on, this is just on the financial piece of the 2021 user fees?
Karen,
Yeah,
just a quick comment.
Yeah.
If I could. I was just going to say that I think some of the concern that I heard at the last meeting was, the realization that the account that their user fees are going into, a sizable amount of that money is just, if it's being transferred the way it's supposed to be transferred, is flowing into the general fund instead of specifically being used for parks. I think that's something we've got to demonstrate going forward, that their user fees are being used to accommodate their needs at these facilities. Secondly, I would assume, and I've got to assume that most of the people involved in these groups, other than maybe the baseball team from out of town, are taxpayers in the town of Lunenburg. And there's a sizable, line item for parks that also goes into paying for cost to maintain the fields. So, if you want to look at it that way, they're paying twice. They want to make sure that the money they're paying is going into the facilities that they're paying for use for. Thanks.
Yep. Susanna?
I like the idea of allowing them to volunteer to work off some of the money if that's an option. Just wanted to say that too. But also, is there a way to roll some of that excess money from parks into a fund that just goes into an account to roll and people want to fund someone's Little League fee or something like that? Is it possible to save that money in a fund for any of these programs, all of these winter programs or fall programs or Little League?
So you mean using the money that's coming in? So using the money that's coming in for other programming?
Well, just take what is this park fund that we're talking about, Dave, that rolls into the general fund if we don't use it?
That's the revolving fund, and we're going to be talking about that in the near future, if not this evening. But I get what you're talking about. Try to develop a fund that could help subsidize fees. That gets into the weeds quite a bit if we try to do it as a commission. I think the individual organizations are in a better position to do stuff like that.
Okay, just a thought. I like the idea though.
Yep.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, you mentioned the adult programs and trying to streamline that. And so what goes into that and what could be streamlined with it to make it easier? Having participated in some of the programs, I'm not sure what goes into it though.
It was more so like when I had started, there wasn't like a set. It was if there was an adult organization, and Karen, please correct me if I'm wrong. If there's an adult organization, for instance, the Phillies is the only one that I've worked with, and they basically came before the commission and just asked and a fee was discussed, and that was how it was established. So it could vary from adult organization to adult organization if we had more than one. And if we're looking to try and get more users on the field, you know, with better maintenance plans and things like that, if we're trying to draw other users to help bring in more revenue, it would just be easier if they had a similar fee structure as the youth sports. So whether we say, or just an established fee structure, whether it's a per person or if they're going to go per hour type of thing. So just making sure that there's an established fee structure versus trying to get them on a next meeting agenda or having to call a meeting so that they can come in and have a price set.
Okay. Okay. So that's more like kind of a formal adult sort of deal than it is like the pickup sort of
Yes.
soccer, basketball, those sorts of programs
Yeah.
that have happened. Okay. Okay.
Great. Anna had one more thing she wanted to add.
You know, regarding the revolving fund, just as, you know, since history started for me within Lunenburg within the past 15 years, the Parks Commission has become more active and, you know, keeping track of more things related to parks. And I know on the side of the DPWs, just as a lot of things used to get done through volunteers for the organizations, and there wasn't a lot of written history on that, things would just get done and the Little League would play. A lot of things also used to get done within the work that the town did. So maybe we didn't have the past, you know, the best bookkeeping practices for the money that came in on the revolving fund. But I know a couple meetings ago or last meeting, David had mentioned that, you know, some of that money gets put on the general fund. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there is a lot that actually gets done. It probably doesn't get accounted the way it should have. We don't have really good records for what work was done and how much that it costs. If it was done by third party, if it was done with in-house groups. So the idea that we have, and that was also a comment that I think from someone who was in the meeting last month, you know, for putting all this money back, how come we can't use for that? I do believe the money was used. It was just not properly accounted. So probably that line item of the budget wasn't used, but there were work that was probably very likely done in one of the properties, but it was just not accounted. Now we should strive for that. We should strive for having a schedule of what kind of maintenance work needs to get done and having a, you know, correct accountability for that. But it's not the idea that we have a revolving fund that we are not using at all and just putting it back in the general fund. I don't believe that is correct.
So there's a revolving fund, and we're gonna, I'll just say this quick because we're gonna put this on as an agenda item at some point. We have a fund, revolving fund. I don't know how you want to look at it. I don't know if it's officially a revolving fund because it didn't go in front of the town for a number of years, where the money has been going. I don't believe it's been expended the correct way. And I don't mean that it's not, the money's going places, but we have not had a clear picture of where that money was going. And as a Parks Commission, it's my understanding that we should have an understanding of where that's going. So it's probably a longer discussion for another night where we can sort of get Dave, our financial man, who has been doing some digging on this, to start sort of laying it out and what we're looking at and what he's found. So we'll definitely be addressing this account and figure out what, if anything, we have as a Parks Commission need to do.
If I could briefly, Karen, just real quick, just one comment about that account. My research on it will start with February 6th, I believe it was 1984. There must have been a special town meeting that day, and the account was created at that town meeting. And if I remember it correctly, it was under Chapter 44, Section 53D. I need to get back to that article and see exactly how it was worded, first of all, before I can really deal with how the account's supposed to be administered.
Thank you. All right, so we've got two pieces of this puzzle. The first one is the financial piece. So let me just go over quickly just so it's memorialized in this meeting. Hold on, I gotta find where I put it. Oh goodness, bear with me one second. I probably closed it. Let's see. Does anybody have the usage chart right in front of them that can?
Yes.
I got it. Do you want to do it, Chris? You want me to do it?
Oh, go if you have it, go ahead.
All right, so what's on the table in front of us, the recommendation from our recreation director for youth organizations for seasonal usage. For resident, it's $20 per child per season. And for non-residents, it's $30 per child per season. Our adult organizations, resident is $25, non-resident is $35 per adult per season. Our camps and clinics are at $15 per child per camp, and the same with non-residents. And then our Jamboree tournament rates would be $10 per child per tournament. The rent, so there's that, and then there's one-time usage fees of residents for grass field of $50 per hour and non-resident of $70 per field per hour. And the basketball courts, resident $15 per court per hour, non-resident $20 per court per hour. So Kayla, I do have a question in this. So in the past few years, we had made the decision to, and I know you alluded to this in one of your statements about adult programming. We had been charging some user groups. We charged a flat seasonal rate versus a per athlete rate. And part of that was because, or all of that was because the amount of time that they were using that field greatly exceeded what, say, somebody that was paying the youth rate or even the adult rate. Would you be recommending that same thing? And if so, should we somehow put something in there so that, you know, that people are aware that there could be a different rate if they're trying to use the fields a certain number of hours a week?
Yeah, and I think that some youth, some adult leagues are longer than others, and they're longer than a typical season. And you know, I've done that in other communities where we set a set. I've done it two ways, where there's a set fee, and then where there's a per player fee. But then if they go over so many hours, it turns into an hourly fee. So I mean, I'm open to whatever way you guys want to do it. If you just want to have a set fee, that's perfectly fine. But
Is do we have to cap the number of game? Do we put a limit or set a number of games? You know, for the adult leagues that happen, like soccer in the fall and that may be separate anyway because we're using a school field, I suppose. But like softball, for instance, in the summertime when that happened last summer, do we need to set a number of, you know, say this fee is going to cover 8 games or?
So that was through us. That softball program was through the rec department or the Parks Commission at the time, I guess.
Yeah.
So what we charged was covered everything. So we didn't charge above that, like a per person fee. It was already included. You know, when I think of softball or even soccer, if we were to have a soccer field, and usually the adult program, they're playing on it once a week, and no practices. The like Little League Baseball, this is the best of my memory. They might have a practice or two a week and a game or two a week. So, but then on the other side of that are people like the high school who, well, we are not charging the high school right now. We have an agreement with them, but when we were charging them, they were using it 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. So their usage exceeded what the usage of a kid who was on a little league field was. And the same with the Phillies, their usage of the field exceeded what our little league players were using. Dave or Susanna, do you have it, or even Chris again, do you have any thoughts on if we need to do anything differently in terms of, I'd like to see that continue, especially where I think the Phillies is mainly an out of town group at this point.
mhm.
So the question is do we charge the players in like the Phillies one time when they sign up, or per game? Is that the question we're trying to answer?
Yeah, like, so when I look at this form and I see the rates, to me, that's reading everybody. So when the Phillies come on, if there's 10 guys on the team and they're all out of state, out of town people, at $35, we're bringing in $350 for their season, but their season could consist of, 25 games and 50 practices.
Right. Versus T-ball is once a week or twice a week, right?
Right. So how to keep it equitable so that we're not, I don't want to overcharge, but I also don't want to undercharge, how to keep it sort of equitable and for field usage. Kayla, do you have a recommendation on how we handle that?
I'm trying to pull up their roster, but I can't easily access it. Because I feel like when I did this, I kind of based it off of their roster. Looking at like who was a resident and who was a non-resident.
Okay.
And because I can't remember how many people they had on their roster. But even if there was 20 people on their roster and there's maybe 3 of them that are in town residents, and then the rest are out of town. And I really wish I had their roster pulled up. It was coming in because I believe their fee was what, $1,400, $1,500?
15, I think.
Yeah, it was something around there. These numbers came in roughly around there. So, I mean, if you want to go a little bit higher on the per person, or if you want to say after so many hours on the field, you have to pay an additional flat rate.
So if I'm looking at 20 players, even if they're all out of town people, that's only $700. Unless
Yeah, which is why I really wish I had their roster.
I mean, I'm fine. I'm fine if everybody agrees, just moving forward with the numbers that we have and saying that we will, we want to further discuss usage times, because the Phillies are not coming to us anytime soon to request field usage. It won't be until sometime in early spring that we usually get an email from them. So,
and I can look at both schedules. I can look at, granted, this past spring/summer was much different than typical.
Right.
But I can look at both of the schedules and compare the hours. And I mean, we can put it on the next meeting agenda if we want to adjust the adult organizations to say, okay, it's either higher per person or this is your rate per person. But then if you go over a set amount of hours, you owe an additional $300, $400, whatever we need to add to make up that difference type of thing.
So I'm going to make a suggestion, and if nobody agrees with me, just speak up, and that's fine. I'm going to make a suggestion that we, if we're going to make a motion tonight, that we make the motion for youth organizations and for the youth organizations and the rentals, the grass fields, the basketball courts, and wait on the adult organizations, because we're not going to have anybody out on our grass fields anyway for those groups, so that we can further discuss it and see if Kayla can pull apart what roster numbers looked like, what their hourly usage looked like, and maybe we can get a better understanding of what they used compared to some of the other sports that are out there. I don't know. What does everybody think of that?
And we're talking for the adult organizations. We're talking about formal groups, not parks programs like softball and so forth.
Right.
Because I can certainly see, I think we did softball last summer with John Palumbo, or summer before last, I guess it was $30 a player, whatever it was, I think. And then if you're looking at, $35 for a non-resident to use the fields as much as they are, I mean, I would concur that there should be maybe some adjustment. Maybe we look at that a little bit more and hold it separate based on what you're saying, Karen.
Susanna or Dave?
Yeah, I'm good with what you're proposing. I just have a quick question, and I'm sure we'll discuss this in more detail later when we get into the adult discussion. Phillies, have they in the past paid for the season and then additional if they go into playoffs?
No,
Or just a whole season
no.
period?
So what we had done, what we had done was years ago when they first came to us and requested the use of the field. I say years ago, meaning when the first time they came in front of me when they were on it. We were looking to charge them basically an hourly rate for rental of the grass. And what we did was we came up with sort of a ballpark idea of what they'd be using. And we came up with the figure and said to them, this is what it is. And that's basically unlimited use for all of your practices and all of your games, even if you make it into playoffs. And some years it's really worked out for them because they might have 5 playoff games at that field. And then, if there's a year that they don't make it, then, they don't get as good of a bang for their buck as they did if they had made it to playoffs. But it wasn't an extraordinary amount. It was about equal to what they would have paid if they had paid an hourly rate for the use of the field.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so does anybody want a motion on the youth rates and so it would be the youth organizations, special events, jamboree and tournaments, as well as the rental of the grass field and the basketball courts.
Make a motion to approve the fees as established for those groups.
Second.
Thank you. Let's do a roll call vote on that. Dave,
Aye.
Susanna,
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And it's an aye from myself. Kayla, do you still have Steve Chow's email address that you can forward him this document? Or let him know? All right, so the second piece of this, and it's one that we haven't fully discussed before, is the actual policy for recreation fields and facility usage. So if I could go down it really quick, have you folks looked at it? I think I forwarded it to you after the last meeting, Chris.
I have it. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So this would apply to all town of Lunenburg fields, parks and playgrounds and courts that fall under the Park Commission. All guidelines included in this policy must be met, or the Recreation Department Parks Commission has the right to revoke the requested facility by applicants. The Rec Department will make every reasonable effort to treat all organizations, teams, and individuals requesting field and facility usage in a fair and equitable manner when establishing priorities for use. Further, all players, coaches, and spectators are expected to abide by the general accepted standards of good sportsmanship, as well as standards set forth by youth groups. User groups must allocate facility usage so as not to discriminate on the basis of gender, disability, race, or religion. Applications. All users, regardless of user type, must complete a field and facility use form. Completing a field facility use form does not guarantee the field or facility space. Submitting applications. They must be submitted to Kayla Wright, Rec Director. She has applications may be submitted via email or by appointment. Telephone reservations will not be accepted. All applicants must be 18 years or older and must be present throughout the entire use of the rental. Applications must be filled out completely, including proper contact name, phone number, email, etc. Applications must be submitted during the appropriate timeline or a minimum of 2 weeks before you wish to use the field. Rosters and a certificate of liability listing the town of Lunenburg as additionally insured are due at the time of your request. Fees are due prior to the start of your season. If proper information is not received within the time period, your request will not be approved and you will not be granted use of the fields. No events may begin before 8 a.m. or past dusk. All applications must state the actual time you wish to use the field and facility. There's no blocking reservations. If you are requesting multiple locations, please submit an actual schedule for each field. Field permits may not be sublet and must be utilized by the user stated on the application. A separate application must be submitted for each field, facility, park you wish to use, and multiple fields at one location will be considered one request. All right, so let's talk about this one first. Kayla, before I open it up to everybody, let me throw out a couple of questions to you. So rosters and certificate of liability are due at the time of the request. So I'm thinking of like Little League, and in the past when I was involved in soccer, their rosters sort of fluctuated for the first couple of weeks of the season. And sometimes that involved kids that never started the season and therefore they refunded. Are we saying that we would expect them to pay that fee even if that player dropped off the roster?
No, and this actually happened with Little League this year. They had a base number and they sent me that kind of, this is our rough, and I basically put it in the system, totaling what their fee would be. And then they were allowed that like 2-3 week grace period. We adjusted it, and then because they did have some that needed refunds and things like that. So as long as there's like a general base count, if you know, I'm not asking for your exact roster at that point, but just a general consensus of how many people you are expecting. And then it can be adjusted.
Okay. And then all applicants must be at least 18 years of age or older, and they must be present throughout the entire use. How does that work with an organization such as Little League, who the applicants are most likely going to be a couple of people from their board of directors, but they're not at every game?
And that's basically they're on their rosters, they're listing who the coach for each team is.
Okay.
So that we know the adult that's with the children at the time. And I think that that's going to become more of a common thing. And just talking to surrounding areas, especially with COVID and needing to know who's on the field, they have to give their roster and the coaches, just because not only for who to contact. And this was one of the things that I ran into this year is there were several different people from Little League contacting me about the grass, but I actually didn't know any of them other than Steve. So it just helps me also know who I'm actually talking to. If it's a coach that ends up calling me or emailing me, I know that they were with the team. So, or if something happened at a practice, I know that the coach is at the team.
Okay. All right. Who else has questions on that long spiel that I just read?
So do we adjust that to say, all applicants or, designated representatives must be 18, be represented at the field, be present at the field? To spell that a little more, or say, or coaches or whatever the proper phrase would be, but.
Yep. So applicants or Kayla, I'll let you phrase it. I don't know why I'm attempting with you sitting right
I got it. I wrote it down. I'll adjust it.
Does anybody else have anything on those?
No, sounds good to me.
Okay, great. And then user priority.
I have to step out for 2 minutes to put my little one to bed.
Go right ahead, Kayla. The couple of things that I did forget to mention were fields are requested and paid for by season. Spring is April 1, weather permitting, through June 30th. Summer is July 1 to August 31, and fall is September 1 to November 1, weather permitting. And applications are not confirmed until application has met all requirements and receives the official permit. No group should be on the field without a permit. So then she went ahead and she did a user priority, which actually I have found to be something that I found to be important, and the school district also has a user priority. So they're accepted on a first come first served basis and will be considered for all reservations according to the following priority list. So number 1 would be the Lunenburg Recreation Department. Number 2 would be the Lunenburg School Department, K-8, and the Lunenburg High School. Lunenburg youth organizations such as town-sponsored youth groups, and she left it blank so that we could add whatever youth groups we needed to. Lunenburg Youth Organization, so non-town sponsored youth groups, must contain a minimum of 80% of Lunenburg residents on the roster to receive this priority level. Then it goes down to Lunenburg adult organizations, and they have to have a minimum of 50% Lunenburg residents. Then Lunenburg-based businesses, which is any business based in Lunenburg, non-Lunenburg youth organizations that don't meet the 80% Lunenburg resident requirement, then non-Lunenburg adult organizations that don't meet the 50% Lunenburg adult resident, then it's camps and clinics, and then it's all other. I will be the first to tell you, it's not like we have a line out the door waiting for use of our field at this time, but at some point, somebody will come to us and there'll be 2 people requesting on the same day, the same location. So to have that pecking order, I think is important. Is there anything in there that anybody would like to see switched or added to?
It sounded good to me. The scouts would fall into that third tier there, fourth tier.
Scouts would probably fall into number 4. So we actually don't, and I know Kayla's not here, but I don't, unless you guys tell me that I'm incorrect, I don't believe we have any town-sponsored youth groups at this time. I don't think we
Is
have
the-
any.
Is the Boys and Girls Club considered?
Nope, they're a private group.
Okay.
And then
Oh.
like Lunenburg Youth Soccer, they're their own thing. They
Okay,
have
so
their-
wait. Sorry.
That's okay. Go
For
ahead.
instance, where would the Boys and Girls Club fall into? What tier would they be?
I think that they would fall
4 as well.
4. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I think they would be 4. I think the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts would be 4.
Okay.
I think the Phillies, depending on where they, how many Lunenburg residents they have, would either fall under 5 or number 8. A non-Lunenburg youth group might be an AAU baseball program or softball program. We have had them request to use our field in the past, where they might only have 1 or 2 Lunenburg residents and the rest of them are older ones. Out of town folks. Kayla, I was just saying, I don't think we have any town-sponsored youth groups.
Okay.
Is there anything like, what would an example of one of those be?
Well, it really all depends on how you want to do it. I know, and I'm just using Sudbury because that's where I last was. Like Sudbury Youth Soccer, even though from the rec department, the town didn't sponsor it, that's where the commission voted to have them fall, because it was assumed and based off their roster that they were 99% all residents. So they chose to have them fall under there. That's really, unless it was something like, because everything else, if we started a league of some sort, would fall under rec department. So that's really the only example that I can think of is if it was like Lunenburg Youth Soccer, Lunenburg Little League, if the commission voted to have them be town sponsored. And Sudbury did basically just because their name was Sudbury Youth Soccer or Sudbury whatever, and they had almost 100% residents. But I know that was coming up as a topic when I was leaving, that they were gonna change that because they actually weren't, there was nothing about them that was sponsored from the town other than using the name of the town. So that's really the only thing that I can think of.
Okay.
So for all intents and purposes, 3 and 4 are basically the same thing for us on this list anyway.
Yep. So what does everybody think about just scratching number 3 and moving 4 up to number 3? And like just removing that town sponsored one
Mhm.
from the,
Yeah, I don't think we need both.
I agree with that as well. As
And so once someone makes it's first come, first serve, but none of these user priorities will unseat a group that has previously submitted their application, right? Is that?
No, it won't.
Okay.
No. And then she lists the by season what the application deadline is. So if it's a spring season, you want to be submitting your applications between January 1 and March 1, and your permit is issued in March. Because again, spring season wouldn't start until April 1. Summer would be April 1 to June 1 with permits issued in June. Fall is June 1 to August 1 with permits issued in August. There's one, nope, that's right. Okay. That looks good to me. I don't know if anybody else has an issue with that. And then Kayla,
I have a question about the going back. And it would fall in, I guess, the first part. And thinking about this because of the soccer that we're doing on Sundays. Do we need to put something in it that these organizations should have some sort of their guidelines how they're operating, their guidelines passed along to Kayla. So like we basically use MISA guidelines to set up the youth soccer. But should we establish something that they should be submitting so that we're
So-
aware of particular guidelines that they're operating under? Just
COVID wise,
what we're into right now, but beyond that,
yeah. So COVID wise, they are required to submit their plan. As for the rest of it, I'm not sure it's something that we necessarily want to dabble in because rules change all the time, and I don't know if that's what we want to do. They are required to have a certificate of insurance before they can step on the field.
Yeah.
That would cover up to a certain amount. So unless Kayla thinks otherwise, I don't know if that's a road we would want to venture down in asking for their procedures, if that's the right word.
Yeah,
that's
no,
where I was going with the COVID plan and so forth. I think that's
Okay.
kind of where
Yeah.
I was headed.
Yeah, so I think the soccer is a little bit different than typical. It's considered a rec program because we took all the registration stuff, which meant that you didn't have to get an individual certificate of liability because you were all signing rec waivers to participate, which is why it became a rec program. However, submitting what rules you were following and making sure there was a COVID plan is a procedure for all rec programs. So for instance, basketball that we're running, the vendor, it is a rec program. We're taking all the registrations. They're signing a rec waiver and everything, but basketball, the vendor from basketball is required to submit to me their plan, which obviously because of COVID, but regardless of COVID, the form that all the vendors are sent when they want to run a program with me does detail out what type of policies they have as a vendor and things like that I look at before saying, okay, yep, we're going to run it as a rec program type of thing, or sorry, this just doesn't align with the direction I'm going in. You can rent the facilities from me, but it won't be considered a rec program. So soccer was more of I would say a vendor type of program, just to kind of classify it, where everybody filled out the rec forms, meaning that there was no certificate of liability because you're not an individual organization.
Right.
But then you did submit, what plans you were following and kind of your COVID plan and everything like that.
Okay. I just wonder if we need to put that in here so that these when they're applying, they know that they need to have that established, and hopefully eventually maybe that goes away. But do we need to put that in there so that someone's not surprised when they're asked for it?
On the request form that I had been giving out for everybody this season, it's basically the form that you guys had, but was altered for COVID, that said that part of their application process was they had to submit a COVID plan. So the request form during COVID is a specific COVID one that says, these are all the guidelines that you have to submit. This is everything that I need to know. If you don't have it, you're not on the field.
Cool.
Great. We're going slow tonight, folks. We're never going to get through this agenda in a timely fashion. All right. Did I miss anything on that front? The fees and classification, it's the same prices that we had just approved, minus the adult rates. that we will take up in the next meeting or so. The liability insurance, this is something that's required by the town. So I don't think it's something that we can't lower these amounts, nor can we say that they can use the field without having those liability, the certificate of liability in. So I think that section is pretty much self-explanatory and required by the town, with the exception, of course, of the applicant will be held responsible for all actions, behaviors, and damages. We've said that in the past. Field lining and maintenance, I think she has spelt out well, with seasonal permits are responsible for lining of the fields. Plan should be submitted to the rec department well in advance of the season. Users are responsible for taking any and all trash out of the field with them, which has been our policy all along. Sometimes we do have trash barrels that show up. I don't know where exactly they come from. And then any and all maintenance issues must be reported promptly to the rec department. Field closures. All recreational fields in the town of Lunenburg are closed during the months of late November to beginning of April. Let me read it and then I'll ask my question. Opening and closing dates for field are subject to change based on weather and field status. To prevent damage and for safety reasons, the fields are not to be used during rain or wet conditions. Please do not allow your participants to play in any unsafe conditions. The rec department follows the below guidelines when determining field status. If a footprint leaves an impression on the turf or in the grass, is removed easily with a cleat, it is considered a wet field. Standing puddles of water on a field is considered a wet field. Footing is slippery and unsafe. Ground is waterlogged and squishy. Lightning or thunder is present or severe weather is expected. Unsafe facility conditions such as exposed stones, severe holes, dips, glass, etc., and frozen fields. The status is determined by the rec director considering many factors, user safety being the main concern. Any team caught playing on a closed field may forfeit their permit for that field for the remainder of the season. It's the responsibility of the field user to check the recreation department website, lunenburgrecreation.com. In the case of inclement weather, the rec department will do their best to contact user groups in the event of field closure. However, it is the responsibility of the user group to check the field status. Field status in the case of inclement weather will be posted online by 1 p.m. If there's a question regarding current field status, please contact the rec department at kwright at Lunenburg Online. The Lunenburg Rec Department does not give credit to refunds for fields that cannot be used due to weather or natural conditions. If an event is canceled due to weather, every effort will be made to reschedule the event for a later date. However, a rescheduled date is not guaranteed, and a rescheduled date will not bump a previously scheduled event. Refunds will be given if the request is in writing at least 3 weeks prior to the start date and is at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Department. So my question on there, Kayla, is there's a mention that the recreational fields in the town of Lunenburg are closed during the months of late November to the beginning of April. Does that mean that if I decide to take my kids down there in December, that I'm not supposed to be there?
No, that's for this is, I would say, for seasonal use, for organized activity. The fields are always open for open passive recreation, but for organized activities that would, because you taking your kids down there wouldn't require you to get a permit or permission from me.
Okay.
This is for anybody that would require. So if it's an organized activity, you know, like for instance, if somebody wanted to go down to the Little League field and hit balls in a couple feet of snow, they can go ahead. But
Can we?
this is for organized.
Okay. Is there a way? Can we maybe work on that wording a little bit? Because when I first read it, I'm like, that means I can't go on the field. And so this is our first read through of these. These policies don't have to be approved tonight. We can approve them with whatever changes we want for the next meeting before anybody panics that I'm going to read them again, because I will not read them again. But I felt like they needed to be read at least so that we are going through them. The general rules are the same things that we've had. Any person violating the established rules and regulations or constituting a public nuisance may be required to leave the premises. Permit holders are only to use those fields specifically designated on the permit. There may be other groups following yours, so it's essential that the fields be vacated by the scheduled ending time. No events may begin before 8 a.m. or after dusk. Gambling on town property is prohibited. The reservation is for field use only. Field permits are issued as is. Bases, goals, balls, and other equipment are not in the permit. Vehicles may not be driven or parked on the turf areas, sidewalks, service driveways, or emergency zones. When minors are using a facility, they are required to have adult supervision on a basis of 1 adult to 15 minors. All trash must be taken off the field with home with users. Fields are carry in, carry out. There's no alcohol or tobacco consumption allowed on town property. The town of Lunenburg carries no medical insurance for users of the facility. Users participate at their own risk. There is no subletting of any field or facility in the town of Lunenburg. Permit holder must be present on site during the field or facility usage. Kayla, can you clarify that one in there with a designated adult? Full responsibility and financial liability for any property damage will be assumed by the user group. No electrical apparatus shall be connected to or operated at town facilities unless it is first approved by the Director of Parks and Recreation and the Fire Chief if necessary. And there's no grilling, either gas or charcoal, allowed at all field facilities in town. The permitted user is solely responsible for compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, including but not limited to State Department of Public Safety regulations, state and local fire laws, state and local enforcement regulations, International Revenue Service regulations, and the CDC. The permitted user must be present throughout the time of the facilities are being used. The permitted user is responsible for the decorum of the permitted users groups, including spectators, and the Director of Recreation reserves the right to close any field or facility due to inclement weather or safety conditions. Kayla, on number 15, do we need, or should we list the Lunenburg Department of Health Department? I don't remember what.
Yep.
Only because in there is, that's what like our snack shacks fall under.
Okay.
Is the Department of Health. I know you said including but not limited to. I just
No, I
want to
can list that.
make it clear that we're not the permit issuing agency
Yep.
of food
Well,
permit.
there's a grill at Marshall. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Second.
They had been asked to remove that grill a couple of years ago, and there's actually with some propane tanks. Dave and I were down there at different times.
They were asked to remove it again this year by
Yeah.
me.
So, yeah, and there may even be one over at McNally. I know that those two snack shacks had grills in the past, so there may still be one over there. Honestly, I haven't gone over to look.
I didn't see one when I was there today,
Okay, great.
but it could be inside. It's not outside.
So the other, while we're on that topic, Kayla, all of those, the snack shacks all fall under the Parks Commission. They're buildings on our property. We should have access to all of them. And I'm not sure we do have access to all of them, unfortunately.
I believe, I think it's Marshall. Steve did send me, I think it's on a code. Steve did send me the code or told me where the key is. He
Okay.
did tell me that when I asked for access to it,
Okay,
but I don't know if that was just Marshall, if that's both of them. I'll double check.
great, thank you. Does anybody have any changes on that long thing that we just read?
The only question I had was, and it can't just personally came up because of snow on the turf last weekend. So the turf, the school-related fields that they're used for parks programs are not on the recreation website as listed as open or closed or anything. I don't know if they need to be.
No,
I mean, I
because
just made a
it's
judgment
not
call
my
and canceled
call.
the snow. Because we say, like, because we mentioned the turf. The reason I thought about it, because I went back and I was like, oh, I should go read that form again because there's snow. Because
So
we do mention the turf in these guidelines.
by turf, she means the grass.
Just
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's-
sorry,
okay.
that's, it's just the lingo that I use with the
Yeah,
DPW.
no,
because
that's
how they
totally fine. I just-
understand it.
Yeah, it was a pretty
That's-
easy judgment call over the weekend to
Yeah,
cancel anyway. But I was
And-
like, oh, instead of like, let me go, good excuse to go read these.
And so the turf in this document is referring to
Grass.
all of the grass.
Okay.
And then the school, we have no control over the school
Okay.
property. So
Yeah.
we're good there. Susanna or Dave, do you have anything on those?
No.
Okay.
I'm
All right,
good.
so let's hold off and let's ask Kayla to make those few changes so that we can, because since there's not a gigantic rush for it, and we can just I promise you, I will not read it again. We'll just read those few things that have been added or changed for the next meeting. And then we can approve it as one in one full swoop. So
Good.
does that sound all right to
Sounds good.
everybody?
Sounds good.
All right. And I feel bad because we have now made Anna wait an hour and I didn't think it was going to be this long. So let's see if Anna comes back on. Our next agenda item is a talent bank applicant. We have not had the really a pleasure / ability to actually talk to somebody who's put their talent bank application in, because usually it happens so quickly that they usually ask us and then a week or two later we're having a meeting. So that's what happened with Chris. So I'm happy to say that Anna has put in her talent bank application. Anna, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and tell us why you're interested in this great commission that we have.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and sorry that I spoke earlier.
That's okay.
No, I've been involved in giving my opinion on different times throughout my history in Lunenburg, and now with the way, my kids are older, and I feel like I have some time that I can dedicate in a more consistent dedicate. I figured the Parks Commission is a good way to start that, and hopefully I'll just stay here. But I know with Parks Commissions, the works, I know we didn't have a big presence of the Parks Commission back when my kids were younger, and I know it has made a big difference this past 5 years, having a more organized commission. And I'm just looking forward to participate and giving my 2 cents when appropriate. Also, I know we have a new DPW director coming in line, so it's probably a good time to revisit some of the policies, some of the ways we used to do things. And I have for work, I deal with a lot of budgeting issues and operations and so forth, so I do feel like I have something to offer on that side.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody have any specific questions?
Yeah, Karen, just quick question to Anna. What do you see as from a town charter point of view or bylaws, the responsibility of the commission? It's been under discussion since the beginning of the rewriting of the town charter and the reorganization of town departments a number of years ago. So I'm just wondering what you picture as the responsibilities of the commission.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, which I actually agree. I think the commissions in towns are given the right to set policies, and they do have a voice on how things are done by setting the policies. I don't think this commission or any other commission should have the role of overseeing employees. I think that's something I actually talked about during the last charter review that we had a couple of years ago. I think that administrative part should be under the town manager. I think we have a ways to set the policies that, the people executing the work for us would. And as a citizen or as a commission, we can always go to the town manager, who's responsible for all employees and execution, and even the select board. But I don't think this commission's role should be of overseeing employees or how things are done. I think that's I don't like that, because I think you could easily get into a position where that would not be ideal for the town. We don't want a commission we don't want town employees to be preoccupied or worried about pleasing commissioners. I think that's dangerous. I think that can be corrupt in a way. And I don't think we have any corruption going on, which is probably a good thing. And it's probably a byproduct of how things are set up. I definitely, I think a few years ago, there was also something, similar discussion regarding the sewer commission. And again, I think that's bad policy. I think the way we have is the way it should be done. And I think having an active commission like we have now, you can make a big difference. We are setting policies. We are making sure the fields are better taken care of it. We are calling it for accountability what it needs to be. We are doing all the right things. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Susanna or Chris, do you have anything?
I'm good.
Yeah, how many years have you been in town?
I moved here, I think 2014. Oh, no, sorry, 2004.
I was gonna say, I know the answer to that question, and it wasn't
I
because
know, third grade.
Great, and you've raised some kids in the school system here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All the way through
okay.
high school.
And they were in Little League, you said, or were they in other organized sports?
Yeah, they were both. So my son was in Little League for baseball. And my daughter was in Little League for softball, and I coached a little bit too. I never played softball in my life, but I read a book.
Great, well, thank you for volunteering.
So just so first, I don't have any questions because I've actually known Anna since 2004. I think she was one of the first people I met when I moved here. So the way this process is going to work is that on December 1st, this will be part of a joint decision with the Board of Selectmen and the Parks Commission. And, you know, they'll ask their typical questions and then we'll make a vote that evening. We each get our own individual vote. And then as long as she is approved, she will then get sworn in and she will join probably the best commission in Lunenburg. But I'm a little bit biased on that. You know, so, all right, Anna, thank you so very much. We appreciate it. You're welcome to stick around if you want to partake in any further of the discussion. I try to keep things a little casual around here just because I think that's what Parks is all about is, you know, being a little casual and making sure everybody gets their 2 cents in. Do you have any questions for us, Anna?
No. Hopefully I'll get your vote.
Sounds good. All right, let's try to plow through some of this because it's now 7:48 and we are super slow tonight. All right, so the next one we added, there may be no discussion and that's perfectly fine. And that's the skate park discussion to get ready for our joint meeting with the select board, which is also happening on December 1st. I can tell you that Anthony Caiozzo did email the chair of the select board to see what his hope was and what he wanted to get out of this meeting. What Anthony wanted to know what the select board was hoping to get out of this meeting. He didn't get a response that I saw yet. So it's my understanding of it that this will be a discussion on proposed location. We've taken a stand on that proposed location already. I would assume that the size will come up. That's something else that we can revisit if we need to, but we did make a motion that passed to support a size of approximately 5,000 square feet. And that's sort of where we are on this. I think that the concern came in back in February and it's just rearing its head again to try to get some momentum when the Parks Commission had made a stand and said that we didn't support it going in next to the TC Passios building, that we thought there might be some better locations for it. So that's where I believe this discussion is going to go on December 1st. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or want to add anything to this agenda item?
I think the only concern I have is if our wishes are overridden, then are we going to be able to steer clear of ownership of it? It's on a piece of property that's under the control of the Board of Selectmen. If we don't agree with that location, I think it should stay with them.
I agree. I'm not 100% sure how it works. This is what I know about land, is that in order for it to be turned over to somebody, it needs to be a vote at town meeting. So all of this land that we have that's considered general municipal, I don't think it's a matter of one group saying, oh, this would be better suited for the Parks Commission or the Cemetery Commission, so they should take ownership of it. I do believe it has to go in front of town meeting. Don't quote me on that. But it's also my understanding that they're not necessarily looking to turn over this piece of land. I believe they want to maintain it as property owned by the Board of Selectmen, but under the care and control of the Parks Commission, which is very similar to what we had going on at the turf.
Right.
Scary, right?
Again, the turf was very well intentioned, and I think that for a number of years, it moved in the right direction, and it's a great asset to the town. But then I think when maintenance issues came up and those were failed to be addressed, and then you've got two elected boards trying to have a meeting of the minds in terms of some policies, I think it got hairy. And for them, I think that, obviously I think that the turf was something that should have fallen under the schools all along. And, I had supported that. And obviously I think it was Susanna had supported that, and that's why it went back. So I do have some concerns over it being owned by one group and care and control of another group. Yeah, I do think there might be some, we walked Marshall Park, and I do think that there is some potential in Marshall Park to put a facility like that, a 5,000 square foot facility, that may be better suited location wise. That's sort of my thoughts. I don't know if
I
anybody
have a
else-
question.
Yeah.
If I may.
Who told her to unmute herself? Oh, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, I remember when the group that's now the skate park group came before the select board and asked for the land next to the TCP to be used as a park.
Yep.
And the select board then gave them that permission. That alone, for me, was sort of a questionable way to decide on that. Because just as use of the land and everything else, I know, I find that it didn't feel like there was a process. And if there is a process for that, I can't imagine like the historic commission coming to the select board and say, hey, let me use the old primary as our grand hall for all our historical artifacts, and then just being able to give that use to them. It just was literally a select board meeting that they said, sure. Is there a process for that, or how?
So, to answer that, I don't have a straight answer for you, Anna. What I can say, and I don't think Chris and Susanna were on board yet, and I'm sure at least Susanna's heard me say this before, and Dave definitely wasn't on board at that point, and he's heard me say it before, is that they came to us, and the dates are eluding me, so I can't give you the exact dates, but a group of kids came to us and they presented their idea. And then it went, sorry, Kayla sent a text. Kayla, that's fine. So I remember being Dennis Benoni and myself, and they gave this presentation, and we specifically said to them, and our minutes reflected that if any parks property came out on top, to come back and talk to us. We never saw them again after that. They went to the Board of Selectmen, and then I don't know what the Board of Selectmen's process is. And then suddenly the Board of Selectmen gave them land, but then it was almost like a given that they thought the Parks Commission would support this.
Well, but my question is, can the select board simply award the rights of use of land?
No. That's not what happened though. My understanding, I think I was actually at that Board of Selectmen meeting. I think the skate park presented 3 different locations to start schematic and pricing queries on. Then one was Marshall, one was down near the blue track, and one was down, one is the proposed location now. And they needed to pick one of those 3 locations in order to come up with any numbers, because the numbers were going to be, they couldn't come up with numbers without looking at one site. And I think the Board of Selectmen granted them the opportunity to price based on that land. And it wasn't like, I don't think that the Board of Selectmen meant to be giving them that land. But
Okay,
then it was like a way to the races. Everything since then has been like it's locked and loaded that they got that land, and I don't think they did.
okay, all right,
And now we have a new iteration of the Board of Selectmen, so I
okay.
don't know.
I
Yes.
hear you. So
No, we have
maybe on,
your question.
so maybe on that December meeting, there will be some more clarity as regards to if it was, hey, we need to get some numbers, or we have the
Right.
right to do that. And is that something that maybe we need to reach out to the town council to understand if we're going to award a separate group the rights to use the town land? What's the proper way to do it? Because it's also, once they start construction there, let's say you got a budget of 100, a quote of $100,000, which I don't know what it is. And they start building, and all of a sudden in the middle of a construction, they run out of money. Those things there, I think there needs to be enough provisions around this plan and understanding what those things are versus just, well, we need $200,000 to build this. And then we can start digging holes over there, which I don't think that's how it should go.
So from where I sit, or my stance on it is that it's not a Parks Commission project. It's not something that we have said we are fully supporting. It's not even something we haven't given our final approval on it. I think that this, whatever their agreement is, I think right now is between the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board and the skate park group. And I think the Select Board needs to sort out how they gave the permission to use that space, because it's not a piece of property that the Parks Commission has anything to do with right now. If the park goes in, this might be a question for town council. If the park goes in, can we be forced to have care and control of it? And I don't know the answer to that. Dave, do you know the answer to that?
No, I really don't. I mean, ultimately, it ends up the DPW's responsibility,
Right.
because
And-
we don't do care and maintenance. So, I suppose the Board of Selectmen through the town manager can say DPW is going to take care of this property. But I don't think they can say that parks funds are going to be specifically used for that purpose. I
Or that
don't
we
know.
have to create policy for it? You know-
Only if it's under care and custody of parks.
Right, so.
Otherwise, they would
Oh.
have to.
Didn't we have a meeting, a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, a workshop one? We sat at that lower table
Mhm.
in person pre-COVID, and that was a Chairman Toll or Chairman Alonso, I'm not sure, said that they deferred to us. They agreed with the ambiguity of this land grant or whatever, long term, but whatever you want to call it, and they deferred to us to decide about the land, didn't they? Do I have this wrong?
I'd have to go back. I thought,
And then we said no.
I'd
I
have to,
thought it was pretty clear.
what I can do is, I would like to go back and watch that meeting. I'm pretty sure I
That
know
one,
the
yeah.
date of it. I am more than happy, as long as it doesn't have any discussion, to make everybody aware of what the date is on those meetings, so that you can read through the minutes and read through, or, go onto YouTube and watch that discussion.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. 'Cause I have a good ballpark idea of when the meetings are, and I'm happy to share that. And I apologize, I should have had it ready for tonight, and I just didn't think of it.
I
So,
found the minutes good. The February 24th, 2020 was the meeting those are the notes that I found about the discussion of
yeah, and then it goes back, I'll go back, Chris, I'll go back and find them, because then there
Okay.
was, we had like a daytime meeting that involved just the Parks Commission and the skate park group. And then we had a joint meeting between the Board of Selectmen. At the time, it was the Board of Selectmen, the Parks Commission, and the skate park group. And then we had the initial meeting that it was just myself and Mr. Manoniat, who, when the whole idea was pitched. So I have a pretty good idea of the timeline of it. I'll see if I can pull it together so that you guys can pull up and see, you know,
That'd be
what,
great.
because the 5,000 square feet was a motion at one meeting, and then the location was a motion at another meeting. So they were done separately. And you can see it should have some of our reasonings behind it, although Parks Commission meetings at that point weren't televised, so there's no recordings. So it's just, it falls back to the minutes. Does anybody else have anything on that piece? All right, let's get through that. And the next thing on our agenda is David asked for general discussion on parks programming. Did you have something specific on that, Dave?
I was just wondering about going into the winter months. What Kay was thinking about in the back of my mind are things like, are there vendors that could run a learn to snowshoe program, or, you know, those types of outdoor winter programs sponsored by parks?
Yes, I'm working with some of those vendors. I reached out to most of them today and will continue this week and start nailing down some of those programs. All the winter programs won't start till after the first of the year.
Right.
And they'll go through roughly March timeframe, because then spring programs typically go April to June timeframe, and then summer.
Right. Okay. Great.
Yeah, well, I do have a question on just programming in general.
Yep.
Could we try to get some programming that's maybe geared towards like the older folks, not necessarily seniors, maybe like something that would cover a broad range of adults, even if it's something as simple as, you know, some walking group or something. I know that there's a group of people in town that tried to get something like that going years ago because they didn't want to walk alone.
Mhm.
You know, maybe something like that to get people out of the house too.
Yes. And I had a few of those planned, and COVID happened and the instructors decided they didn't want to. But I have reached out to them again, and I'm actually trying to work with Fitchburg State about using the indoor track for the winter months. It's something that I did when I was in Fitchburg. They basically got a walking pass through the rec department and could walk at certain hours. I'm just trying to figure that all out with COVID and the college's policies and stuff like that. But I am working on that.
And we did, just so you know, in case they say that somebody has already called here, a year or two ago, it was before you came on, we had a couple of requests for use of that facility, and I did reach out to try to see if we could make it work. And I don't remember what ended up happening, but whatever it was, we couldn't get it to work.
Okay.
And it's something that we had. So if they say that somebody from Lunenburg had already reached out, it was me a few years back. So.
Gotcha.
All right, so then municipal
Reason,
property. Yep.
if I could, Karen, just
Yeah.
add one more comment. The reason I brought that type of activity up is I'd like to try to gear or push some programs towards Marshall Park over the next six or 8 months to get people into that park and see what's there now. And maybe we'll get some more insight from the public as to what they see could be there, or they like what's already there. I think the more like with the temporary skating rink, if that goes into Marshall, and then there's some complementing programs that go along with bringing people into Marshall Park through the winter and maybe next spring or summer. then we'll have a group of people that are already using the park as we work towards a master plan and renovating that park into hopefully a much more usable area.
I agree. Definitely agree. All right, before we move off, does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Nope.
All right, so municipal property discussion. This is just trying to get this in people's minds because it's a topic that's come up at open space. I sent everybody a document today. I think I included you, Kayla. If I didn't, I can re-forward. It's a list of properties. It shows what falls under the Parks Commission, who it's owned by, and then who has care and control over it. So for example, Fitzgerald Field is actually a piece of property that's owned by the Conservation Commission that's in the care and control of the Parks Commission. And it's been that way for decades. And then the rest of our properties, and then there's some other properties listed there. Some of them are properties that the town just has owned for quite a long time. There's another list of them that properties that were taken through tax title. So if their taxes weren't paid, that they came into the town. As one of the charges of the Open Space Committee is to look at space that we have in town and how it's utilized and what could be better, how it could be better utilized. So there's some properties on there, such as a piece of property over on Parmenter. I don't remember what it's listed as on the, you can actually look at it right here. It's over on Lake Shirley. That is a beautiful piece of property that probably has, 2 or 3. It's Parmenter Street, Lake Shirley, Parmenter Street. It would be, a piece of property that could be used for access to Lake Shirley as maybe a rooftop park to bring in kayaks or boats, or like kayaks and canoes and that sort of rooftop style boat. So these are properties that the Open Space Committee is starting to look at. It's a process. They need to determine a whole bunch of different things to see if it's something that they think that another group might want to use. But looking at this list, we as a Parks Commission can also say to the town, we're interested in these pieces of property to come under the Parks Commission for future use, or maybe there's something immediate that it could be used for. So that's what that whole list of property is. Some of it, like the Woodruff property, I don't know a lot about it. It's a huge piece of acreage. That piece of property is listed as agriculture. So I'm assuming it's being farmed out in some way. But there's all different needs that can be met with these properties. Dave, do you have anything to add on that? Because you were at the last open space.
Just that I asked for it to be on this agenda so that we start actively looking at the ones that might be desirable to be under our care and custody, because there will be a batch of them that will be decided at Springtown meeting. And if there are pieces we want to go for, it's going to have to be in that article that goes before the town meeting in the spring.
And I'm all about not being surprised anymore. I'd rather go into things being more than prepared. So I think
Right.
this is the first step at getting it on everybody's radar so that people know how to find it. If you go to the Lunenburg assessors page and into their, where you can pull up everybody's property, if you copy and paste the parcel ID number, you'll actually pull up the land, because I know that there's no street address on a lot of these. So I know that from the open space, there was a whole bunch of pieces of land that we had discussed a few weeks ago, or a few months ago. And I went and I drove all the properties to check them out and see what they were about. So most of them can be seen from the street, but I did make sure to include the properties that came under us so that we would see what we already have. Because I know sometimes we forget what we have, like the Veterans Memorial Park, since we don't do a lot with that park because the maintenance comes under the DPW. So Yeah, so that's basically what that agenda item is, and that's what that document is that I sent everybody. So if you, this will be, probably end up being a recurring topic, just in case we do want to discuss it. If you see a piece of property on there, if you want more information, you can either come back to the Parks Commission and ask it, or Brandon Kibbe with the Open Space Committee, or even myself can get you any information you need on that land. And then when it's time, if there's anything that we're interested in as a group, we'll pursue that piece of property. The one piece that I did not list on there, I don't know if anybody, and it's not on there, 'cause this is from the open space plan, is that we now, the Parks Commission has a piece of property off of Northfield Road. We own the south, we have care and control of the south side, and the Conservation Commission has care and control of the north side. And that's a large piece of property on Northfield as well. And that was purchased by the town just recently. So, does anybody have any questions on that one?
Karen, just a comment before Anna. We had talked in the past of I don't remember exactly how it came up, but looking for, I think it was Dave Prokofiev really that was looking for it, was community garden space. The more I've thought about that since that time, I think that's something AgCom should be pursuing rather than parks. Unless we had a piece of property that was already in our control that would work for that. And we've already identified that we don't.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we necessarily don't, but I agree with you on the AgCom piece. AgCom currently, I don't believe, has any property that falls underneath them. I can say that there is a wedge of lands over off of Wallace Park. If you ever look at the map of Wallace Park, it's rectangular, but there is a one lot cutout or stick out, I don't know what you want to call it, on the side. Not a huge piece of property. Currently, it's, I believe, a weedy mess. When I drive through Devon's, I see a small area that has small plots, and I always think to myself, that would fit over on that piece of property, and there's water right there. So there may be something, but I do think you're correct in that it should fall under AgCom. And you know, they can always look at and see what we have, and if it's something that they want to pursue with us, they can always bring it to us and see if we're interested in, you know, letting them start a community garden on a piece of property that we own or we run, care and control.
See, I come from the farming community, and my vision of a community garden space is much bigger than that. And I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying and the size of the space there, but my picture is the area like, I want to make sure I get the right town, Littleton uses adjacent to Route 2A, beyond Littleton Common, you go past the commercial area there where Donwood Supermarket is and stuff, and past the, there's a private school on the right for young kids. There's a community garden just beyond that on the right. And that's a fairly substantial space there. Bolton, down in Bolton Flats, that's a huge one that's been there for many years. Just because I come from the farming community that farms acres and acres of land, you know, that's what's pictured in my head.
Yep, no, and I agree with that, you know, and again, I think this is an AgCom thing.
Right.
You know, when I look at the size of pieces of land, though, that the Whalum has, seems to have smaller parcels,
Mhm.
you know, and it's walking distance to a lot of people. So it may be something they're interested in, but again, I think that it's an AgCom thing.
Yep.
Anna, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so, you know, there are two things, and then there was something, and then, anyway, the first thing is, the beautiful thing about the place down by Whalum is that the highest concentration of people in Lunenburg is on that area. And the idea of community garden, you know, giving the ability to, you know, a small family being able to garden a small plot where they're, you know, they can grow vegetables for their family just for them to use versus a huge plot where it turns more into farming versus gardening. I love the idea of a small public garden, and I don't necessarily think it needs to be under the agriculture committee wing. If it could be ours where we set, this is the community garden. There's so many little pieces of land that can be used, and the families that sign up, they're responsible for that. And that can be under Parks Commission since it's adjacent to Wallace. So I love that idea. And I do have the idea. Maybe I'm also a farming girl, but I did live in the city, and the community gardens tend to make very pleasant space for urban zones. Now, Karen, when you talked about the piece of land that's not listed in this file, is that the one that was bought 2 years ago or 2 town meetings ago?
No, it was
That
the,
was,
well, maybe it was 210. It was this, no, not 2 town meetings ago. It's the Saliba property.
yes,
It's
yes, I think it was 2.
I
Okay,
think
maybe-
it was the,
One side's
Prior to-
conservation, the other side, they want to put fields eventually. They talked about
Right,
long-term and
something, it's a basically a banked piece of land that, it's, anything could go on there. It was, yeah, it was a meeting or 2 ago. It wasn't much longer than that because I was on open space, and then shortly after I left it is when it went in front of the town for approval. So it wasn't that long ago, and then I rejoined it. So it was either spring of 2019 or it was fall of 2019, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it was.
The acquisition just completed, actually, just
Correct.
recently.
Okay.
Yep. It just finished, so. All right, and Kayla's only got about 10 more minutes with us, so let's see if we can. Park properties, including but not limited to Marshall Park and Track. This is where we normally have a discussion over Marshall Park and what the plans are for that. So we did a walking tour on Friday. We walked pretty much the whole piece of property, including down in the woods. We got to see the car that we own, the pond that we own, a chair, an office chair. We got to see it all. And it has a ton of potential. I think that that piece of property is, even now it's used a lot. But I look at the future and see what we could do with it. And when I say do with it, I don't necessarily mean we need to build some state-of-the-art thing. I think a classic park that's well maintained with something for everybody would be a gold mine for this town. So I say this every single meeting. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to how to do this. So I'm going to defer a little bit to Kayla. So Kayla, you sent a list of a list of things that we had sent. What is the next step in this?
So it really depends on the direction that the commission wants to go. And I put a few suggestions at the bottom that should be considered potentially prior to master planning or included as part of the master plan. And I believe was Dave maybe or Susanna, I'm not sure, who mentioned it on Friday, to get a full survey of the property so that we know where all of our property is, all the lines and things like that. I think there were a lot of things on this list that many of you mentioned as short-term goals, the track being the biggest one. So I think that is something that we need to look at for funding sources to see. And the track portion of it, I had actually reached out to a few people, I want to say back in December or January. Jack had asked me to reach out to people and just talk to them about quotes for revamping the cinder track or replacing it. But then it didn't really go anywhere from there. So I think the next step is determining, after everybody looks at this list, determining if there are certain things that we want to pull out as short-term goals, and seeing what we can do with the finances that we currently have, knowing that we wouldn't want to spend all of our money because they are going to be part of the master plan. But something as simple as, a cosmetic facelift to the basketball courts, so they could be used, can be part of the short-term plan. and seeing how much that would, and that will require me to meet with DPW director, which is not a problem, but to see what we can, if that's something he thinks can be done in-house, if he'd rather me contact somebody outside to do it. And then along with that, and we did some of that, and I can fully do this, is basically an assessment of existing conditions for every aspect that's currently used, and what's not currently used. So for instance, when was the last time anybody's seen anybody on the fitness circuit? Those types of things. And then whether it's something the commission wants to do, or if you want the consultant to do it as part of the master plan, is the community outreach portion. If you want to send out a survey, if you want to have focus groups, if you want to just have a general community meeting, whether it be at the park or virtually, things like that. And then from there, taking all of that feedback and meeting with a consultant saying, okay, this is where we're at now. You need to meet these certain goals, and whether it be, this is what we've identified as the commission's top priorities, as well as the community's top priorities as far as needs versus wants. Because that's a big thing, making sure that the needs versus wants are identified. Yes, we would all love a $1 million park that has every amenity, everybody's listed, but is that actually the need of the community and the programming that we see as the future? Because as part of the assessment of existing conditions, it's also looking at the feasibility for the future of those. For instance, do we need all of those baseball fields at that park? Can some of them be turned into a multi-purpose field? Because do we have more usage for a multi-purpose field in town where we don't have any multi-purpose fields? So that's all part of the assessing the existing conditions, and then between the existing conditions and the top priorities within the commission and the community, identifying the needs versus the wants, and then kind of part of the RFQ would be determining how much input the commission and the department want to have, and certain benchmarks that the consultant would have to meet. So, okay, they have to have this many community meetings, they have to have this many meetings with us, and that type of thing. And then kind of saying, okay, now you need to take all these ideas and put it into a plan for us, and into a plan that they determine, okay, this is your benchmark 1 year in, this is your benchmark 5 years in, this is your benchmark 10 years in, type of thing.
So how do we figure out time? Like, two things are popping in my head. One, if we wanted to hire somebody to do some of this, how to determine the cost. But number two, there's some grants that had been discussed at an open space meeting. I think Kayla, I had discussed them with you, that are more of a time sensitive thing for submission to the state. How do we figure out what the timeline is on this? So
I can look at those grants more, and I can actually reach out to open space to make sure I'm covering all the grants, because there are a variety of different grants. And I know of a handful of them, and they may know of more or different ones. And then the grant deadlines basically determine our timeline, in essence, of having a actual plan in place. And I can tell you, so another thing that I did back when I had first started was reach out to some consultants that I had known. And I also reached out to Judy from Leominster. I've known her for the 11 years I've been in recreation. And because she sits on, Doylefield doesn't fall under the rec department, but she sat on the advisory board for it. And she gave me the name of the local consultant that did the master plan for Doyle. But the consultants that I reached out to, without actually giving them a full scope, and just a rough kind of, this is what's there. This is what we're kind of hoping, knowing we had already talked about it at a few meetings. They had kind of given, it can fall anywhere between 50,000 and 100,000, depending on how much involvement we want them to have.
And this is
Um,
planning wise, this is just planning.
This is just the consultant, the planning, and it gets more expensive when you want multiple plans. So, and I actually went through this with the community center in Sudbury, and ironically, it just passed their town meeting. So they'll be getting a new they'll be getting a new rec department. But there were over 20 plans that were developed for it. So each plan obviously adds more to it and more to it, but that's why I stress the knowing the needs versus the wants, because the first plan that started out was all of the wants, and it was a $45 million building that would never have passed. And the plan that passed was a $23 million building that had the needs in it. And, you know, that they took the standpoint of, here's what we have, here's where we want to go. You take that, come up with plans and tell us the direction we should be in based off of current trends, things like that. And you can either have it fall on the consultant or on me, of kind of surveying other communities to see what they have for facilities, what they have for programming, which I've talked to surrounding towns regarding programming, things like that, to kind of identify, are we on the right track with what we're thinking are our needs, or are we totally off base?
Okay. Does anybody have any input on this? Because
Yeah, speaking more, we're getting pretty late here, so I just want to talk about the short-term goals versus the overall master plan, because that is going to take a while, and we may not make that March date or whatever it is for the grants that Open Space was talking about. I mean, a complete renovation of Marshall Park might take a year just in the planning, and have it planned for 23, 24, something like that, 22, 23. But during our walk around the other day, I think we agreed that there were 3 short-term goals from the commission's perspective, and that was the basketball court, the track, and the pocket park at Marshall Pond. Kayla, my feeling on the basketball court is that I don't see any reason why we can't do a cosmetic overhaul of that area within our, maybe some of our 2021 funds, and if it spills over into 22, fiscal 22, maybe 22 also. But I just, unless you come up with numbers that are way over the top, it's care and maintenance that has not been done over the past 10 years. So we just take some money from our account that is earmarked for care and maintenance of parks and see if we can put it towards that cosmetic makeover there. Also, Boy Scout troop in town is quite often looking for projects for an Eagle Scout. That one might, I've thought about it over the past couple of days. Is doing the entire project for the basketball court might be more than any one Eagle Scout could take on, but there may be one aspect of it that an Eagle Scout could take on, and they do their own fundraising and make the project happen. So anyway, that's the basketball court. I personally see that we should be able to do that within the funding that we have in parks on an annual basis. And if DPW doesn't have enough help and or time to do it, then maybe we can contract out the little bit of work that needs to be done from my point of view to bring those courts back to use. But spend as little as possible, but bring them back to a usable condition, but not pristine. And then build the pristine rebuild into the master plan. so that when you go after the bigger funding, then maybe you can resurface the whole court like we did over at Wallace, or whatever other improvements you want to do, like create a multi-use court, so on and so forth. So that's that. The track, I have a route to that being dressed up and looking great sometime next spring.
Jump off, guys, but I gotta go. I gotta get my
Yeah,
oldest one
no,
in. put her
that's
to
fine,
bed.
Kayla. I'll catch up with you because I'd like to sit down with you, the DPW director, and myself and discuss where I'm at with the track at this point.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
All right.
And then the pocket
Kayla.
park, that's a separate project.
okay.
Night, Kayla.
So Karen's aware of this. The Phantom of Marshall Park has touched up about a 8 by 12 foot area of the track surface. Anybody has a chance to go over and take a look. There needs to be basically 3 phases to rehabbing the surface of that track. The first is to either do a thin scrape across the surface to get the loose organic material on the top, such as leaves, pine needles, a little bit of grass growth on the surface. I think it actually could be done with a sweeper just to brush the surface off. Then till down 2 or 3 inches, drag it with, excuse me, in the old days, we used old bed springs, but something to drag it level, and then roll the surface. And we'd have a nice back to cinder black flat surface, firm, that you could walk on. And again, I see that as the cosmetic fix for now, and we may want to do something more enhanced within the master plan, assuming the track stays in the park after the master plan.
Okay. No, I think I replied back to you earlier today or yesterday that getting that track up and going again is, I think, would be a huge asset. And I think it would be wonderful for the folks of town because like Susanna pointed out on Friday, people drive to the center of town just to walk the center of town.
Right.
To give them another area, I think would be beneficial. So you're going to talk with Kayla some more and the DPW director?
Yes. I also would like to mention that I've already had a well-known resident of Lunenburg volunteer with a piece of equipment that would do the tilling of the surface
Okay.
for
Great.
free.
That's awesome. So for the bigger master plan, I guess I would ask everybody to review the document that came in from Kayla late today. Take a look at what's on there, see where she had prioritized things, and give some thought on to whether or not you think it's something that we want to bring in a consultant for, or even just want to explore bringing in a consultant for, and get some prices on that. I do think the lesson learned on the parking lot, and I don't know how everything went down. Chris, I don't know if you know this because you live over on that side, and Anna, you're on that side too, but when that whole parking lot tree situation went on, it makes me realize that we need to have that whole park property surveyed at some point, so we know exactly where our boundary lines are, so that if we decide to put in, and I say put in, I don't know if that's the right word, Dave, but even put some nature trails in there, we're not crossing into somebody else's property. I think that's important. Does anybody else have anything they want to add on the sort of where we are, what they think our next step should be?
I think Dave's hitting it right now. The kind of the immediate sort of fixes that we can do. I mean, as far as immediate fix with the basketball court, if we're talking about just cosmetics, only one of those 2 courts would really be able to be cosmetically fixed, because as we saw, there's
A tree?
roots in a tree growing out of the other one. So without getting it repaved, that court isn't usable. So we'd have to take some safety measures into consideration, maybe with that other court. And I don't know if that's removing the, the other two basketball hoops that are there to discourage anything on that side, or I don't know what the solution is to kind of secure that to keep it safe, but the court closer to the pond is definitely,
Yep.
it's the surface of that seems salvageable and certainly usable right now.
I have to
And the
wonder.
fencing around it should be kind of fixed up and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I have to wonder too, after being down there and obviously seeing the tree growing out of that court. I also wonder if there's other things that could go there that, for example, Gaga Ball, wouldn't require a gigantic surface area, but it might be something that could go on the other side of that court that is still usable, so that we would still have half of it to use. And that might be an idea for a Boy Scout project too, Dave. I think that there's things down there, and I don't know who I said it to on Friday. I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that we need to have activities that are not overly structured, that we can go out and do when we want to go do them. And whether that be disc golf or Gaga Ball or, tennis, or just having open basketball courts. And, I think that, and having it for a wide variety of ages that cover a span, so that I could bring everybody from my children through my parents down to an area, and we could all have something to do either together or individually. I think it's become very clear that those are things we should be valuing at this point, because when pandemics hit, you lose that organized
Sure.
activity. So
I think we'd have to account for accessibility down there if we are to use. That's probably a bigger cost than even the cosmetics, I would assume, because there's a lot to clear out of there to make that accessible.
And I'm sure that Kayla knows more. I know she knows more than I do when it comes to this stuff. It's my understanding that if you work with what you have, you may be grandfathered in, but if you start doing major work to it, you're not. But then I think Dave had made a comment the other day too about something about parks, not necessarily everything having to be ADA compliant. So maybe somebody can come at some point from, I think we actually do have an ADA commission.
Consultant.
Yeah, we must have somebody. I'm sure somebody can enlighten us on that, so that we're as inclusive as we can be. And even, I personally think everybody should have access to everything. So
Yeah. Karen, could I correct one thing?
yes.
At least in my memory, that comment about park properties don't necessarily have to follow the regulation. I think it was more, our discussion at the time was more about parking and numbers of
Yes,
spaces.
it's
Correct.
Very
Yeah.
true.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
You're-
and I agree with you. I do believe that if we just do some simple cosmetic repairs to the basketball area, we don't necessarily have to get into all of the accessibility issues. And that's why I said that we do the enhanced improvement of that area in the master plan, where ADA is going to be all over the place. Compliance is going to be required in a lot of spaces, and the funding would be put in place for that.
It may be something we ask for sooner rather than later, Karen, if we are going to think about even cosmetic things, to make sure that we're following
Yep.
whatever we need to
Yep.
follow.
And I'll point out again, and I guess it's never too late, but we don't, as far as I know, we don't have anything in as a capital request either. Personally, I like always having something in, because I think it keeps our commission in people's mind and thinking and realizing that we're still here, even if we don't necessarily get what we're looking for. I know a few years back, it was, first it was the playground, and actually that playground over at Wallace Park started off as a one structure, like climbing thing. And then it turned into something bigger, thanks to a resident. So, that was brought to light during capital planning, and then capital planning capital covered the current rehab of the court over in Wallace. So there's a lot of good options, and as well as options of what we can fund ourselves, through our revolving account. So
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Just so you know too, the DPW capital request for 2022 is not complete at this point.
Oh,
We
okay.
got a capital planning committee, got information from the town manager on all the other departments. And with the transition being right at the time of the deadline, the DPW portion of it is still being reviewed and developed.
Okay.
So there is potential that something could be plugged in there, although it's, the clock is ticking on that, I'm sure. I think at the very least, this commission should be considering 2 RFQs between now and February, maybe, or maybe that's too tight a schedule, but I wouldn't think so. One is trying to get a handle on what the cost of a survey of that property is going to be. I've spoken with a couple of people, and the comment was it's going to be expensive. It's 28 plus or minus acres. And although the deed reads pretty straightforward, it seems like it wouldn't be that difficult, but I don't know what the cost of surveying is these days. And the second one escapes me right at this moment. I will think of it before the end of the meeting, I hope.
All right, sounds good. All right, do we have anything? Let's see, what else is on our agenda? Did I close? I closed our agenda.
Yeah, I did too.
Spring 2021 town meeting warrant article discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, that's your request. Chris, if you haven't figured it out yet, and Hannah, I know you're still listening, if you want an agenda item, it's as simple as asking. Like usually, if sometimes I forget, I do try to send something out and say, does anybody have something they want? You just, no matter what it is, just be prepared to run with it, because if I don't know where you're going with it, I can't. So, all right, Dave, this is you.
Yeah, I asked for this to be put on because of the research presently on our revolving account, or ongoing research on the revolving account. And just want to, again, get the seed planted and the ball rolling as to whether or not we want to try to create a revolving account under a different section of the general laws and roll this one that's presently in existence into a different type of revolving account. I'm not saying that we definitely do, but there are some pluses and minuses to it. Talking with Kayla the other day during our walk around, she's very familiar with the different types of revolving accounts that are appropriate for a Parks Commission or Parks Recreation Department, and didn't seem real keen on a 53D. So I think besides needing to understand what we're presently operating under, I think before we get too far into the winter, so that if we want to change that situation to a different type of revolving account, then we need to develop an article for Springtown meeting to make that happen.
Is there, and maybe you're this person, but is there somebody that can, or maybe it's Kayla, I don't know who it is, tell me who it is, who could give us the background on what we are, the information on what we have now, and what we can and cannot do with what we have now, and what we're, what we should be doing or supposed to be doing versus what some of the options are, because I'm not overly familiar with the types of revolving accounts. And I would
Kayla's very familiar with the different types. The only thing that we haven't pinned down yet at this point is, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, need to go back to that special town meeting and determine exactly the wording of the article that created it. If it was as simple as, will the vote town to accept section of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53D in regards to Parks and Recreation, then we fall back to the law itself. If there were special provisions in the article, then we need to know that also, because that may allow for the revolving account to be handled a little bit differently. So
Okay,
that's where it starts, but she's very familiar with what can and should be done and should not be done with the different types of revolving accounts.
can we do that in January, do you think, Dave? Or is that cutting it too close for you?
January, February. No, I think that's fine.
So what was the date again? February, you think it was February of 1984?
February 6th, 1984.
The library is still, no, the library is periodically open. You work during the day and I am
Right.
home during the day. Why don't I reach out to Muir and see if how I can get access to the town reports that they have in their side room. I've had to do this before, looking for something else for open space. Why don't I see if I can find that, the wording on that.
That would be great, because that's,
Okay.
we need to know what that article said before we
Okay.
can move forward with the rest of the research.
And so it was specifically an article on, it was a parks revolving.
It was an article to accept the Mass General Law, Chapter 44, 53D, Section 53D, creating a revolving account under that Mass General Law.
All right, so let me do some legwork on that, and then let me plant the seed in Kayla's head to ask her to give us a presentation of some sort at our January meeting with what all these revolving accounts are. Once I find that, Dave, I'll share it with you. And if it's something that we need to solicit some assistance from the town attorney, we can certainly grab a spot. We could all go to it together, but it has to be a posted meeting. But if there's, as long as there's no quorum, at that point, if Anna's on it, a quorum is always going to be 3. So if there's 2 people that want to go, and whether it be Dave and someone else, Dave and I, or 2 other people, we can have that conversation with the town attorney
Right.
if we need to.
Right.
That's easy
And-
enough. I'll be happy to do that and figure that out.
Yeah, and town council helped me get to this point
Okay,
with dates and so on. He has a list from the town clerk's office of all of the Mass General laws that have been accepted by the town.
awesome. Anna, you had something?
Yeah, so I'm looking at revolving funds for non-school department programs, types of accounts. And the only type that addresses parks and commissions is 53D. Just out of curiosity, do you know which account Kayla was talking about?
No, I don't, but she listed 2 or 3 different ones.
Do you remember any other numbers?
One of them might have been, no, I don't even want to guess at this point, but I remember something with an E at the end or something like that. The thing is that there are revolving accounts that can be created by town meeting that are in the Mass General Law. It doesn't specifically state them as Parks and Recreation revolving accounts, similar to the revolving account that the cemetery department has, where they transfer every year at town meeting money out of their or earnings of money out of the account for care and custody of graves into their revolving account to be used to maintain the cemeteries. So there are different types of revolving accounts that can be applicable to, fee-based revenue.
When you say fee-based, you don't mean taxes collected, or do you mean?
No,
fee
no.
basis?
What I'm basically looking for is a revolving account that will take in the revenues from field usage fees, rentals, and what we talked about earlier this evening, which is the monies that are going into this 53D at this point. And it just gives you a better, some of them give you a better checks and balance and a better control through a process.
Okay.
And the other issue that we have, and Kayla was struggling to get a handle on it, is that we have bills that get paid for parks, and we don't know who's signing off on them. I.e. one we talked about the other day, the telephone bill, as simple as a telephone bill for the town beach. We didn't have phone service to the town beach all summer because the wire was down. And she made multiple phone calls to try to get them to put it back up, so that we never had phone service for the entire summer. I have yet to find out who okays paying something like that and whether it did or did not get paid. You know, I feel it should go through a voucher system that either Kayla approves a voucher and it goes on from there, or the commission, although we're not supposed to be involved in the day-to-day,
Right.
operation. So I
Yeah.
see it through Kayla signing off on a voucher so that it's verified that we got the services before we pay it.
And
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, we don't want to go down a road of, if the phone is paid within part of the town's phone bill and go through all this type, all kinds of work, and you gotta have a benefit to creating a process and a system around certain things. I don't know if a phone bill is the best example, because I think we might have bigger fish to fry.
well, we pay for it. So the phone bill comes out of the parks.
Right.
Comes out of the parks budget line. It's because it's at the.
Is there, I'm just saying that you don't want to get too bureaucratic about certain things and lose some of the efficiencies that we have by being part of the town. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, let's be careful what road we decide to travel down.
I'm just one that doesn't like to pay a penny for something I didn't get.
Right there with
Well,
you.
I think that's a different, the phone not being used, the wire being down is a different topic than who's paying the bill. I think that the problem there should be, the bill can be contested that if the wire was down.
And they were very much aware of it because they were contacted multiple times. That's fine. I agree. It's a tiny piece of the $40 million budget that we,
Right.
that the town administers every year. But if you don't pick away at these little pieces, then the little pieces become huge pieces.
Well, I'm going to go back to one thing that I said earlier about the revolving fund. I don't think things were being paid for the parks. And I think maybe the way the bookkeeping of a lot of those items used to be done were not necessarily the most, itemized as we would like to be. But, the town has been served by, we have had parks, we have had different things cared for. It's not a huge budget. The last time I saw was what, $20,000 and change.
It's much more than that.
It used to be that, because I remember once you told me that was the number.
Closer to 40,000 now.
Yeah, so we get
That's just in the revolving account. Then there's what, 80
Right.
or 90,000 in our line item.
So we we just, it's not making sure we are definitely getting services. Maybe the way the bookkeeping was done, how things were itemized, is something we can improve upon.
Yeah, but Anna, I'm also a taxpayer in this town, and I don't want to see my tax dollars being paid to an entity that's not giving us services.
Yeah, I'm also a taxpayer in town, and I think we have a lot of things to take care of it versus, just don't pay the phone bill if we don't have the service.
So that's what-
Right, but nobody has control. Nobody has a verification point. It's a moot point. We really don't need to talk about this tonight. It's
Just don't create a
Small
system
piece.
for having to pay a $20 phone bill, because that will make creating a system to making sure the $20 phone bill is getting okayed might derail the purpose of managing a much greater budget.
I disagree, but that's
Okay.
fine. We can
This is
disagree.
fun first meeting.
All right, so we have that on our radar. We will certainly I'll do exactly what I said. I'll get that looked up. I'll ask Kayla to give us an idea of what the different revolving accounts are, what they mean, what it would allow the town or us to do, and what it would allow us not to do. Because clearly there's different reasons for different revolving accounts. So we'll get it figured out. I will ask her to do that. I'll email her after this meeting. All right, do we have any public or board comment?
Good question. Should we, so like I saw Kayla's post for like the ice skating and so forth, and obviously that like she indicated earlier that it has, it was an overwhelmingly positive response through I didn't notice if that was shared to the greater, there's obviously 25,000 Lunenburg Facebook pages. I know it was shared on the parks page, which has a limited number of followers. Should we be advertising and kind of pushing just from maybe more of a kind of a marketing perspective of what we're doing, what we're aiming to do?
So
that information out to the greater, the greater groups. I know some commissions post their agendas and all those sorts of deals. Should we be trying to push ourselves out there a little bit more amongst the discussing Lunenburg pages and so forth?
I don't see a problem with sharing. Here's what I can say on that. And I am absolutely no expert in this area of the open meeting law. When things get shared and discussion starts and there's multiple members of a single board in that, it's very easy to raise a question on whether or not we are within the open meeting law. Because like I said, only 3 of us constitute a quorum. All it takes is 3 people. I know that this has been brought up in the past, and I don't know what the answer is. So I have no problem. I think things can be shared. I certainly share things on my own page that Kayla has posted before. I guess I would just be concerned about a dialogue then starting. So I guess if you were to share it, my advice would be don't get involved in any.
No, yeah, correct. Yeah, we've seen that, pit and spiral.
Yeah.
Like to avoid all that. I just mean like there's a wider audience on discussing Lunenburg page.
And it also
and maybe it's something that's something that Kayla shares via that page as well. Like shares the Parks and Recs post to that page or whatever it may be.
Give her a list of they should be easy to find, but she could probably join. I think that's set up that she could join other
schools and community page or
and
something like that.
Yeah. We can certainly ask her to.
Yeah, I was thinking from a marketing perspective of sharing the good things. That there's a lot of good things that are going on. Like my wife said to me tonight, like we have a friend whose daughter just took some cooking classes that seem to be run through parks. And there's a lot of good things going on that I'm not sure that the larger community is well aware of.
And the more people would be apt to join the Lunenburg Rec page, and I think that's a good thing. So,
yeah.
No, go ahead, share it, and then I'll also ask her to join some of these pages and see if she can share it. I know that she struggled with enrollment, and with anything like any new business, if you want to consider the recreation department of business, it takes some time to get your feet underneath you and get some momentum and get things rolling. And I think COVID really threw a crimp in that plan of hers to get things rolling. So it's even slower than she had hoped. But I think anything to help get the ball rolling and continue to roll would be a good thing.
And the number of programs that are run that was eye-opening to me as I looked at coming on board, and it was like, oh wow, like it was I was in my soccer bubble or whatever, and
I've been in that soccer bubble with you.
Yeah.
Know it well. As far as I'm concerned, soccer is the only sport that should exist.
A little bit of basketball over here too.
Hey, we get some of that here too. So, excuse me. All right, so we already have our next meeting date set. We are meeting December 1st as a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and then I think I thought we had December sets. Did we not set December?
Thought we did. Pulling
Yeah.
up my calendar now. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Check the 14th. I'm
14th. I
pretty
couldn't
sure
see it
it's
on
the
my
14th.
little, yeah,
Yeah, I never added it to my calendar.
yeah, December
Uh,
14th.
Okay, so we have December 14th. I'm going to assume at this point we'll be back on Zoom. So I will request a link for that. I am petrified of Monday meetings because it means I have to remember the middle of the week before to get this agenda posted. Hopefully I don't mess it up. I'm really famous for messing things up. So I will get it posted for the 14th. I will usually email the week before asking people to chime in with any agenda items. If you don't answer me and I have your phone number, I also text you to remind you to check your email to give me agenda items. So
I'll shoot you my number, Karen. I'm not sure if you have my cell phone or not. You
that-
might. I don't know.
I probably do somewhere, but yeah,
Yeah.
feel free to send it over. I'll try not to call you in the middle of the night. I'm really good at doing
I
that.
leave my phone downstairs. You won't bug me.
Awesome. All right, I think we are done, folks. Can I get a motion to adjourn at 9:01?
So moved.
Second.
Great, and a quick roll call on that. Dave
Aye.
and Chris?
Aye.
And it's an aye for myself as Susanna had to step away to put her daughter to bed. Thank you, folks. Anna, thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you on the 1st of December.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.